Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, CEO of IoT One, the consultancy that helps companies create value from data to accelerate growth. And our guest today is Matan Libis, VP of Product at SQream. SQream is a scalable data analytics platform built for massive data, providing business intelligence both on-prem and on the cloud. In this talk, we discuss the architecture for modern databases built for extracting insights from petaflops of data. We also explored the merger of traditional data warehouses with data lakes into lakehouses, where large volumes of data can be queried without duplicating to a warehouse. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you'd like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, you can email us at team@iot1.com. Finally, if you have an IoT research, strategy, or training initiative that you'd like to discuss, please email me directly at erik.walenza@iot1.com. Thank you.
Matan, thanks for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I'm really looking forward to you to guide me here. This is a bit of a more technical topic than I typically host on the podcast. Often we're a bit more focused on end user applications, and here we're really going to be talking about the fundamental infrastructure of how data is managed. So I'm looking forward to getting out of my depth.
Yeah, we'll try to make it interesting.
But I would love to start by learning a bit more about yourself. I mean, you have, you're not the oldest person we've had on the podcast, but you've managed to fill up the past 10, 15 years with a lot of experience, including, I don't know if you were a founder, but at least you were eventually a CEO of a company that was acquired just a couple of years before joining SQream. Can you just touch on a few of the highlights and what is it that led you today to the position where you are with as VP of Product with SQream?
All right, so we'll start from the end. So Matan, I'm the VP of Product at SQream for almost 8 months, I think, which actually feels like a lot more because we were super busy. Before that, I came from a completely different space, focusing on AR, augmented reality, which is super kind of hype these days. But we were focusing more on the technology side, on 3D and computer vision technologies. I had even, as you mentioned, the chance to be a CEO of an Israeli startup that was developing kind of from the early stages the infrastructure for augmented reality and from a lot of, by the way, IoT use cases at the time from manufacturing floors. On 2019, I was happy to lead the company to a successful M&A for a US-based company. And then for 2 years, I worked under that company, running at first the Israeli office, but at the end, I was running the whole R&D team. So I kind of had a chance to play around different roles in my career. Before that, I actually had my own startup in the field of education. I had a great opportunity to bring it to the US market and actually moved to the US market for a few months. It was in the educational space. So I was going from campuses across the US trying to bring it in. I had to learn a lot from that time. So this is kind of the background. You asked about what led me into joining SQream. So first of all, I was intrigued by the challenges that the company was facing, is still facing. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it a little bit further down the line. But moving from on-prem to cloud and taking the technology stack into a new kind of area, it's super challenging and super interesting for me personally. I love this kind of challenges. And also, I didn't want to get kind of stuck in the same space. I was for a lot of years in augmented reality, and I wanted to improve myself and the rest of the world that I can deal with other technologies, other spaces. I can learn more. And yeah, I'm so happy I made this change. I have a wonderful team here and the product team at SQream, and going to the office every day is like super fun, and I'm learning so much. And I'm happy I have a stage or a place to share what I was able to learn in the past 8 months.
Awesome. Well, let's get into the topic of what technology you're dealing with. I mean, for a certain portion of the audience, probably the easiest way to describe SQream is that it's a competitor of Snowflake. So that will intuitively make sense to some people in the audience. The headline on your website is fastest time to insight for data at any scale. So it's a database infrastructure for converting raw data into insights. So that's another way that we could think about it. How would you describe the field that you're in?
So I will try to take a little bit less technical approach, and then we can jump into the more technical. SQream actually allows companies to get answers from its data and get business insights, as you mentioned, on where it was unattainable. Because we shine where other players or can't deal with the amount of data. I'm talking about obviously fast. This is what we sell. We sell performance. This is always the key thing here. But not just that, we allowing our customers to deal with their data. We usually shine above 1 peta, and this is very unique to us. We actually utilizing the GPU, and I'm sure later on we can talk about a little bit about the tech stack. We're utilizing the GPU in order to get faster insights on more data. And this is what we bring to the table.
So yeah, we're definitely going to have to dig into the tech stack and why you're able to differentiate in kind of these use cases around massive data. But maybe we can just cover them first from a use case perspective. So what would be a handful of scenarios where a traditional kind of database or streaming database would not serve?
So first of all, we're talking about the amount of data you would like to get insights from. One of our main use cases for our top customer, we're talking about they manage on SQream 10 petabytes of raw data. Those kind of numbers are crazy. We're talking about 100 terabytes ingested into SQream on a daily basis, more than 100 data engineers that are asking more than 9,500 queries per hour. Those kind of numbers, and when we're talking about scale, this is scale. This is more than just buying more storage. The ability to actually get the insights and be able to do a very complex queries and complex joins. This is where we feel comfortable, and this is why most of our customers are enterprise customers, because usually we are better fit for companies that a lot of data. Again, we're talking about more than 1 peta. This is where we usually feel comfortable.
Mm. Okay, so what would be scenarios where this is required? Are we talking about managing aircraft, kind of data coming off aircraft engines? Are we talking about just very large networks of kind of asset fleets for vehicles or manufacturing plants? Or what would be scenarios where you would be generating 10 petaflops?
So let's talk about 2 use cases. The first one, let's go from the manufacturing space, a very IoT kind of use case. On the manufacturing floor, all companies would like to be able, their dream for a manufacturer is to use all the data they are collecting to predict machine failure or equipment malfunctions before it occurs. This is the simple need. Everybody talks about IoT and how much sensors are collecting all the data all the time. But I feel like not enough people are talking about, all right, how are we going to be able to process the data? How are we going to be able to get insights? So in that use case, for the manufacturer, they have on the production line, on the floor, a lot of sensors. They're trying to detect a lot of stuff through that process. And then they're trying, as I mentioned, to process the data. They're building machine learning modules on top of SQream in order to get, again, machine failure or equipment malfunctions predictions. This is very common. We see it in a lot of manufacturers, but we also see it in telco. For example, a lot of network malfunctions that they would like to be able to predict. So this is one very IoT kind of use case that, by the way, this is one of our most common use cases. And our big customers, this is what they are chasing after. And we see them expanding and taking it into more and more factories and expand this use case to more and more production lines because they get a lot of value out of it. we can all understand for big manufacturers to be able to predict mistakes or production line problems worth a lot of money for them. So I'm happy we are able to bring this kind of value to our customers. So in terms of the second use case, let's talk about telco. So we have customers that they want to collect all the data they can on their users, right? On their customers, how long they will spend on the phone, or how many texts they send, all this kind of user data. So before SQream, they were able to look at 6 months. They were able to do analysis and query 6 months of data. With us, they can do 2 years. This is usually coming to family dinners. People ask me, all right, what do you do? All right, I'm working in this company called SQream with a Q, which is already weird. And I'm trying to understand, we are a relational database. It doesn't make me easier. And then I always present this use case. We're allowing companies to ask bigger questions anywhere they want to do it. If they were able to analyze only 6 months of data, like now they can do more. And this is simply the value we bring.
Okay, well, I think that's a great one to dive into and to understand a little bit more. Because from my perspective, I'd say, okay, you got 6 months of data, you've got 2 years of data, so okay, you've got 4x as much data. It feels like that shouldn't be such a huge jump, and then or like if you want to do 4 times as much data, maybe you just reduce the number of variables somehow. But it sounds like that was a step change in terms of functionality. So why is there a step change? Why is there a barrier where another database would not be able to manage this 2 years of data just by adding more processing into the network?
So you're getting more. The fact it's all about in-memory and more stuff like that. The fact where you're collecting this data, and the fact that SQream can separate between the storage to compute and can scale them both where they're not dependent one on another, actually allowing that. Because in storage, you would think you can buy more and more and more storage, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to manage that storage. In a matter, you're going to be able to get insights from your to your questions or for your queries, and this is where the change actually begins. So our value proposition doesn't gain only on the amount of data we can process. It's also about, as I mentioned, the opportunity to scale the storage and compute independently. We're able to support complex query like multiple joins, storing, and aggregation. And obviously, at the end, everybody talks about cost performance, right? It's not a matter just to get the best performance. You want to get them in a cost that makes sense. And this is always the game we play. All go to market. Again, I mentioned enterprise. It's always start with a POC. They always our customers always want to try it from themselves. We're always starting with a POC where they actually start testing it from themselves, and they can see the kind of value they can get from it.
Yeah, you have a few performance metrics on your website comparing SQream to Snowflake and to Redshift. And the numbers you have there are roughly, I'd say, an 8 to 10x improvement in terms of time. So from ingestion and query time. And then also something like an 8x, 9x improvement in terms of total cost. So how would those be calculated? What would be the variables that you would be measuring in order to come up with these benchmarks?
So, as I mentioned, total time to insight start with ingestion the data. If we're talking about traditional warehouse, and after we're going to talk about the future, we'll see how we're going to solve that as well. But the fact first of all, the ingestion time to the warehouse, and then the query. After you already got the data in, now you want to query it. So it's the time it takes you to get the answer to your question, the answer for the query, and the cost that was attached to it. We're talking about storage, if we're talking about cloud compute, and everything that got involved with that. So this is how we kind of measure the total time to insights, benchmark compared to others. We're taking the same data sets, the same queries, we're doing the same process. We ingest the same data, and then we try to query it. We see how much time it took and how much it cost us. the fact that another value proposition is the fact that because we are utilizing the GPUs, we need less physical hardware, which actually leads to a smaller carbon footprint. And this is, I know people not always talking about it, but this is very big for a type of customer that don't have enough room to place in all the hardware they need to, and using us, they need less space in order to put all their compute and storage.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting point. So you're running on GPUs as opposed to CPUs. Is that the case?
First of all, we are utilizing the GPUs. It doesn't mean we don't use CPUs. We make sure the right calculation happens on the GPU. By the way, the reason why GPU is optimized for executing multiple simple operations and tasks at the same time. And this is actually how big data analytics works, storing tables, aggregation. So as I mentioned, not only GPU, but we are offloading the most of the complicated tasks in order to get the best performance.
Gotcha. Now, are you running your own databases, or are you always built on Azure or AWS or another provider?
So we always run our own database, but we have partnerships with vendors. So if we're talking about on-prem, until not so long ago, we're a very traditional on-prem data warehouse. And as I mentioned, we are separated from storage. So we have a lot of partners like Hitachi and Weka that are actually providing the storage to our customers. And if we're talking about cloud deployments, so yes, we are what we call the multi-cloud. We can do all the big cloud providers, GCP, AWS, and even just launch a partnership with OCI from Oracle. So it really depends on the use case and the customer. We're trying to be as agnostic as possible.
Okay, got it. Yeah, you can see I'm just going to keep peppering you with these kind of ignorant questions. I think that's my role here, is to try to. My goal is at the end that I understand this, and then hopefully our listeners also will. So if I'm thinking about the architecture, we have SQream for data analytics. You run your own database, and then you have all of these other components. You have storage, maybe cloud storage through the larger providers. You have other things like analytics, building machine learning algorithms and so forth. You maybe have data lakes, Hadoop, etc. You're running SQL queries. You have Python, TensorFlow, etc. kind of on the data science side. How do all those components fit together into the solution? And what are you doing in-house, and where is SQream interfacing with these other components of the data management stack?
So in terms of components in SQream, we're talking about SQreamDB. This is our main database. This is our main product. We also have what we're building right now. This is going to be kind of the lakehouse. We're going to talk about it soon. But in terms of components, we have the engine. This is the query engine, which is the essence of our technology. We have the storage manager, compiler, which is actually in charge of optimizing the SQL, actual SQLs on SQreamDB. We have a lot of connectivity around it, and this is kind of the ecosystem around it. So after bringing the raw data from a lot of places to the lake, for example, and then you use the warehouse in the middle and query whatever you need. Usually you connect it to some BI tools like Tableau or Power BI. And for that, we have a whole suite of connectivity based on JDBC or ODBC and some native connectivity, which allows the end user, which can be a data engineer, actually uses Tableau or other BI tools in order to get his insights and build his reports and dashboards.
Okay. And if we go back to those use cases that you touched on earlier, one of them intuitively feels to me like real-time data is more important. If we're talking about manufacturing environment, you're really trying to react to events in real time, or at least relatively real time. And then in the other case, it sounds like it might be more dealing in days or weeks, maybe even months, but with very large amounts of data, trying to extract business insights. Are there different architectures, are there different solutions that would be necessary for a manufacturer versus a telco versus a bank versus an airline?
So first of all, the answer is yes. The regulation is different. So we need to make sure we match. Different industries has different regulation. If talking about InfoSec, and today, obviously, this is a very big thing, especially for this type of customers. So this is very sensitive, and there's a difference between them. In terms of real time, we don't obviously. This is an analytical database. This is not real time, but sometimes it get closer to real time, and for that, this is no different in terms of the deployment between a telco or a manufacturing. That's the use cases are different, and what they do with the data. As you mentioned, some of our customers are building after all the data is ready, all the raw data already came to the warehouse, and we did all the preparation on that. They building machine learning algorithms out of it that help them to make decisions. And some of them are just building reports and trying to analyze months of data back. So it's more depends on the use case. In terms of our end, as I mentioned, between the industries, there are the different regulation that we need to match. Some industries are more on-prem. Some industries already are moving to the cloud, which usually makes the scale easier. And this is one of obviously the benefits of a cloud application. So this mostly the difference.
What about when it comes to different types of data? So, structured data versus unstructured data, like video or sound waves. Are there particular data sets that you prefer to focus on as more kind of suitable for the structure of your database?
So we mostly concentrate on structured data as we're coming from a warehouse, but as we're moving into the lakehouse, and the future of data analytics, we are open ourselves to new semi-structured and unstructured data. So we're going to be able to support other use cases beside the traditional data warehouse use cases. So yeah, actually we're starting with semi-structured. This is what's going to be in the beginning of next year. And hopefully later on to fully unstructured data types as well.
Okay, I got to ask that. Is Lakehouse, is that like a combination of warehouse and data lake? That's kind of like a...
Yes, you got it.
Okay. The first time I've heard that. It makes sense. Yeah.
We can touch that point. I'll be happy.
So what would that mean? So I kind of know, like, I guess data lake is more a pool of, it can be more unstructured, maybe a warehouse more structured. So what would a lake house mean in terms of how that would be differentiated in structure from a data lake and warehouse?
So with warehouse, and the most important thing is the fact we are separating the compute from storage. With warehouse, you had to ingest all your data into the warehouse, right? This is why they call it a warehouse. But everybody are using lakes, right? You're talking about S3, and this was the biggest thing I think AWS brought. The fact that you can throw all your data types, all from whatever it comes on one place, on one lake. So now with the lakehouse, you can query the lake itself. You don't need to move it to a third location and wait and pay for double the storage. And obviously, you're losing all this communication time and network time. So you can just query your lake, and this is what they call a lakehouse. And I gotta say, this is kind of the biggest trend in the data analytics world. We see all the big players trying to launch their own solution and their own answer for the lakehouse. We are among them. We're planning to launch our own lakehouse offering beginning of 2023. It's going to be native on the cloud, which is a very big step for us as an on-prem company, having a native cloud SaaS solution. And we're really looking forward to that. We're actually starting with a kind of most of use cases are going to be around preparation. We saw that, for example, in EdTech, that they are collecting a lot of data and they are using cloud. We see a lot of use cases where they need to prepare the data and move it from one place to another and transformation. So we are starting our offering with that kind of preparation transformation platform. And later of 2023 and later that in the future, in the next few years, we are planning to have a full lakehouse solution that hopefully one day gonna replace our on-prem solution.
Okay, interesting. I'm looking at your website now. Is that Panoply, the platform, or that's a low-code platform? Maybe that's a different solution.
No, so it's not. I'm kind of sharing with you some insights that are not public yet. It's not on website yet. Panoply, this is a company we acquired, I think, almost a year ago. Great team with a great product. Actually, they're helping businesses to create warehouse with no code. This is kind of our no-code solution for a kind of a lower level of data customers that actually want to kind of department stores, some CFOs that would like to create some data dashboards, and they don't have data engineers team of data engineers that can help them create whatever dashboards and know how to use SQL. With Panoply, they can just click on a few buttons and create their own kind of reports. This is a different, obviously, use case from SQream that eventually they're going to be joining together, but we're still working on that.
Well, let's talk a bit more about the people in the loop here, because that's actually more where I'm coming from, is working with the business side, right? Working with the business, sales, marketing, manufacturing, et cetera, who understand day-to-day operations and they're, where the use cases are originating. And often, their teams are relatively small. Their data science teams are relatively small, and often maybe also relatively junior, right? So they might have a couple 20 somethings, and somehow they need to use that to translate a need into a result. And then maybe somewhere in the organization there is a much more sophisticated, mature team, but often actually accessing those resources can be difficult, and there's kind of a time bottleneck and so forth. So maybe it sounds like you already have a couple different approaches based on the acquisition of Panoply, but who would be the typical users? And if somebody wants to use a solution like this, what kind of capabilities do they have to have in their team in order to make effective use of a solution like SQream?
First of all, this is an SQL database. So the end users know SQL. Usually those are data scientists or data engineers that they are in charge of this thing. And I always separate between, there are two approaches for any, probably it's not only for tech, but only thing I know is tech. Sometimes you're going to a potential customer and try to explain him why he needs your solution, how he can benefit from your solution. The other approach is they're already looking for this type of solution like you're selling. You just need to show them that you are the best or the best for them. Lucky for us, there are so many big, like the other players in our market, as you mentioned at the beginning, are huge companies, right? From all the cloud providers on the way to Snowflake, only the biggest and most successful IPO on Wall Street. It just shows that the market is already educated, and we just need to prove why we are better. But so you ask about the end user. Usually they know SQL. Sometimes also Python. This is very common with data scientists. They're very familiar with the tools, the BI tools, and ETL processes. But they're not necessarily, or usually they're not the decision makers for us, but they are the end users. So we're always trying to, from a product perspective, we're trying to think about both. We have the one challenge about how we're going to sell it, and then we need to make sure that the end user that actually uses it after we already make the sale, he needs to be happy. So it's not two different approaches, but we need to make sure we're kind of aiming to the right message to the right receiver. So yeah.
Yeah. So would the budget usually be coming out of the CIO function or the CTO function, or is it often coming out of a business unit or maybe engineering for a manufacturing organization?
So we usually see the CIO level, if not specifically the CIO, so the C level, but usually those, we're talking about big budgets, a very long commitment. And usually the CIO, this is the one that actually usually pushes it inside of the organization and actually understands the needs of replacing or adding or using SQream. So yeah, this is why it's such a big difference between the decision maker to the end user.
Yeah, I suppose this is not a bottom-up solution. This is much more of a top-down solution.
Unfortunately not. Although I'm a big fan of bottom-up solutions and bottom-up go-to-market strategies, at least in on-prem, this is not very common.
So help me understand how this would work in terms of the end, because I guess top-down, you have a set of top-down kind of requirements that are generally aligned on, but then you also have a more or less infinite number of ways that you could be using the data in this database to serve different teams. And so you say, okay, organization, we have access to this database and the ability to extract insights. And then there's all sorts of, a factory general manager, head of a business unit who says, hey, I think we can extract insights that would be useful for me. And somehow they have to translate those, into requirements, send them to the data science team, and then translate those back into solutions. Can you share some best practices for how that works? Because from my perspective, I'm often working with the teams that are kind of bottom up, with the head of a business unit in Asia, something like this. And I feel a lot of pain, right? Where we might have a great team somewhere in the world. We might have great infrastructure somewhere in the world. But in terms of, a VP's ability to access those resources and get something, built on a reasonable time frame, still there's a fair bit of pain there. Do you have any best practices that you see working with companies that are successfully able to, let's say, maximize the benefit of putting this infrastructure in place?
So best practices is hard. Like always, we have a very technical and big delivery team that actually works with the customers on implementing and on training sometimes. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of optimization that needs to happen, and it depends on the use case. As you mentioned, a lot of small tweaks that you need to know how to use it. So obviously, we have a lot of technical documentation that we are making sure, and this is also happening in the responsibility of my team in the product, to make sure we're writing and updating all this technical documentation. But a lot of it is also working with our delivery team and making sure there's a lot of discovery happening in the POCs, right? We jump in the POC, we understand the actual use case. Our delivery team actually give them kind of a white glove kind of experience to really understand their needs and how we can even get it better and how we can optimize the hardware that they acquired. Even more than that, we tell them which hardware they should buy. Obviously, we are utilizing the GPU. GPU is not a very common thing these days. So we need to make sure people are ordering it in advance, and we help them to get their hands on it if they need any help. So it's very specific to the use case, and especially when we're talking about 10 petabytes of scale. Between me and you and our listeners, sometimes we are also kind of we are intrigued by our customers pushing our boundaries, right? Nobody sells a database telling, all right, you can use it up to 10 petabytes. Yesterday they used 10 petabytes. In a month it can be 15, and we need to be ready for it. And unfortunately, there's no best practice for someone that's scaling, 50% of their data in 3 months. We need to be very creative, and honestly, this is part of the magic that happens here at SQream. The fact that we can react and we can give our customers this kind of experience.
Yeah. Just since you mentioned it, I'm curious about on the hardware side. Have you had to also kind of get creative over the past 12 months in terms of managing situations where a company's not able to acquire the hardware they need, or is it generally just maybe a matter of delaying something a month or so, but generally you're able to kind of address the need on the hardware side?
Oh, so creative. From getting another partnership because whatever potential customer want to work with some storage vendor that we never met with him, now we need to create a relationship in order to win that opportunity. So we're building this relationship in a month. Sometimes we are convincing, or we want to go ahead with a POC. And we don't want to wait, and the customer don't want to wait 60 days till you're going to get all the hardware in his factory. So we're convincing him to do this POC on cloud, for example. And for some of our customers, this is super new. Maybe this is their first actual interaction with cloud, and we bring in our partners from the cloud providers, from Google or for AWS or from Oracle, whoever I needed, to make sure it happens. So creativity is this is the way I see it, is very startup oriented, and we have to be this way in order to play next to those kind of competition that we have today.
Okay, well, let me ambush you with a creativity question here then. So you know that I'm sitting in China, and I don't know how closely you've been following this, but the U.S. has recently sanctioned certain types of chips coming into China, which means the Chinese are going to have to get very creative in terms of how they utilize kind of older chips to accomplish machine learning and so forth. Do you anticipate? I don't know how familiar you are with that, but basically, 7 nanometer and so forth are not probably going to be available in China for 10 years. Who knows? Right. But do you anticipate that being really a significant bottleneck for their ability to build complex, kind of the data structures that they would need to do very sophisticated AI, or do you see just ways that they can architecture around that?
Okay, so. First of all, this is just my opinion. Okay. I don't want to get too political here. But if it's going to be a problem, I think it will. And this is why they're doing it. They want to create this problem, at least in the short term. I'm sure that China will overcome this challenge. I know one of our investors is Alibaba, talking about cloud providers in China. So I'm pretty sure that they're working on a solution for that. So I think if someone in China going to experience this lack of hardware from the West, it's going to be I hope it's going to be only in the short term, and I hope in a year or two, China going to be able to catch up and have their own hardware. We are also looking into other options, not just getting us close only on the GPU. Other types of special hardware we're looking into. By the way, also because GPUs are not very common these days, especially since COVID. And we're doing more than that. We used to go only with the strongest hardware you can get. Oh, there's a new GPU from NVIDIA. Let's recommend all our customers to buy it, because stronger GPU will bring them, or whatever, stronger hardware will probably going to result to better performance. But we mentioned that this is a cost performance game. Not necessarily the best hardware going to make sense in terms of the business. So we're always making sure to do our benchmarks, not only on the latest hardware. We also take in older hardware that sometimes you can get the 2x on the performance, but the price is 4x. Those kind of cases, maybe you would prefer to buy an older hardware, because, as we mentioned, this is not a real-time decision usually. It can be up to close to real-time. So if something takes a minute or 2 minutes, but it's going to cost 4 times, not necessarily it will make sense.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. Well, last question then from my side. You've already mentioned lakehouse is kind of a concept that you're excited about in the future. Anything else over the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years that you're particularly excited about in this area?
So I think, and this is, for me at least, this is the biggest question that's on the table. They're all moving to the cloud. So before we're talking about lakehouse, first of all, there is a shift of data analytics to the cloud. It happened already a few years ago. We see Redshift and BigQuery from GCP, and obviously Snowflake. You cannot talk about data without mentioning Snowflake. And we see that super successful in the cloud. But when you're reading articles, you see that, most of them talking about 80% of data still on-prem. And only now we see companies shifting to the cloud little by little. We still don't see a lot of businesses that runs 10 petabytes on the cloud. But you're asking me what's going to happen in the next 5 years. I'm sure everything's going to shift to the cloud. And the way to go there is hybrid. Hybrid meaning not just a double offering cloud and on-prem, but they're going to be connected. So if you update something on-prem, it will be updated on the cloud and the other way around. And I think this would be the middle step towards cloud. Maybe it will take 10 years to get there. But I have a lot of faith that at some point we will get there, and people are going to stop by their own storage and place it in their in some whatever corner of the office of the building and protect it.
Yeah. It seems to make sense, right? Just a matter of timing, but I think the economics are there, and also from a security standpoint,
Exactly.
people might feel secure, but the reality is you're much better off having AWS control your data than your IT team.
Exactly. And this before we mentioned scale and auto scale, right?
Yeah. Great. Well, Matan, anything else that you feel is important for folks to know?
I don't think so. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you.
Eric, thank you. It was great meeting you, and thank you for hosting me.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@iot1.com.